I'm very excited to be back for another week of Your Brand Amplified with Sarah St. John, the Frugalpreneur. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Now, I don't know your whole story, but I'd love for you to share as much as you want. I can say that your podcast really resonates with me, the whole idea of the frugalpreneur, because most of my entrepreneurial journeys have been bootstrapped
Mm.
and started with zero or, you know, me in like some situation where I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then put the money into this so that I can actually build up my own business.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah. So I would say, well, I've always kind of had an entrepreneurial mindset, I guess. Like when I was a kid, I would take things that I would get for free, like, pencils and candy and sell them to friends. But I didn't really realize that it wasn't until like 2008 that I actually realized that I had an entrepreneurial mindset going all the way back then. I had actually had 6 different jobs that year,
Mm.
not at the same time, but throughout the course of the year, and realized, I think I want to work for myself. And so the first thing I started was a photography business, but I realized that just the expense to
Mm.
maintain and upkeep like equipment and lighting and software and all that stuff. Plus, I was doing weddings and portraits because that's where the money is when you're first starting out. But I like taking photos of like animals, architecture, and
Oh no.
landscapes, not people. So then I decided to try to do something online, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So I tried a bunch of different things like drop shipping, affiliate marketing,
Mm.
blogging, on-demand t-shirt printing, all this different stuff. And it was kind of in that process that I discovered like all these free or really affordable tools, resources, and software that people could run an online business on a budget. And so I got the idea to write a book called Frugalpreneur about the different online business models and how to run them on a budget.
Nice.
And then while I was writing that book, I got the idea to launch the podcast, also called Frugalpreneur. And it was just going to be like 10 episodes to help kind of promote the book. But I was getting more leverage and traction with the podcast than the book. And so I kept the podcast going. I've been doing it for like 3 years now. I think about 150 or so episodes. And I just love the networking and connections and everything. And so but yeah, so it took over a decade of trying a bunch of different things before I figured out that podcasting was my thing.
Yeah, well, and I think that is the entrepreneurial journey is if you have that spirit, you're going to do I've had very disparate businesses, right? And that's what you do. You kind of go, okay, wait, maybe this, maybe that. And I once on one hand, somebody could call it shiny object
Mhm.
syndrome, but on the other hand, I'm like, no, that's not what it is, because if you have this in your blood, you're going to keep trying and trying and trying until you find that thing that really like sets you on fire and that resonates and that you can turn into a great business for yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, I think sometimes I call it shiny object syndrome, but it might be more like, I mean, if you find something that you're good at and successful in, and then you start looking around at other stuff, that would definitely, I would think, be shiny object
Yeah.
syndrome. But whereas my situation was more like just trying different things that I had heard of, but the issue was I wasn't passionate about it. It
Mm.
was more, I would say transactional or trying to make money, like drop shipping, um, like just finding a way to make money online. And then that's why I didn't stick with them because there wasn't that passion there.
Yeah,
So,
that
yeah.
makes sense. Well,
Hmm.
and so now you have a podcast that's been around for 3 years, as you said. You have great episodes. I've been listening to several of them. And then you have your book. And then you also now help other people start podcasts.
Hmm. Yeah. So I have my own podcast production agency now, which, so it's kind of funny because I started the podcast in 2019. I didn't even start listening to podcasts until maybe a year or something before that,
Mhm.
because I'm more of a music listener in general. So like when I'm driving, if there's not a song on, like if it goes to a commercial or the DJ, I switch. So when people would say, oh, you should check out this podcast or that podcast or whatever, I'd be like, I don't like people talking on radio, so I don't think I would like a podcast. But then there were a few that I had heard about that like really interested me. So I tried them out and then I got hooked. And now I'm subscribed to like 30 different shows. And so, yeah, what I love about podcasting is that, I mean, some of them have ads in them, but for the most part they don't, or they're not as long, but at least all the content is niched down and, to whatever topic that you're interested in versus a DJ talking about anything and everything. And so, I guess, where was I going with it? Well, so I just started listening to podcasts not long before I started my own. And then once I started my own, then I really got into it and I was producing my own show. I figured, why not get paid to do it for other people?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I started doing that. And it's like post-production, but also like marketing, coaching, monetization, like stuff like that as well. Not just the editing part of it, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's something that's important for people to think about for any online business, right? Because podcast is essentially an online business. There are resources out there, but you have to figure out which ones are the right ones for you and the right fit for you. And you have to figure out, it's like any product. It's not just you release it to the world and you hope that somebody listens to it, or you release it and think, okay, everybody's going to hear it now. I mean, my partner, he is in the film business and he's an editor and he's done different projects. And he's like, oh, I didn't really realize how important marketing and PR is to start from the beginning of a project until we started dating, because, he, as a creative, he was just thinking, oh, I'm just going to create this product and it's going to go out there and it'll be great. But no, you have to have all of those elements that you said, who you're marketing it to, who's your audience, how are you marketing it, making sure you have the right music or the right fit and the right flow for each individual podcast and podcaster and their personality, and package that together. So what are some of the things that you would share with somebody if they were wanting to start a podcast?
As far as like how to get started, just the basics, or kind of, I guess, what to think about as far as just,
I guess it's a part A and a part B, right? Like start, what do how do you pick a topic? How do you decide what you're going to speak about? Are you going to interview people? Are you going to, are you just going to talk the whole time? I mean, because I know there's so many different kinds of podcasts, it can get overwhelming to figure out, that. And then how do you then transition to figuring out, okay, how do I do this thing? Besides going to your website.
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely find a topic and niche down as much as you can, because I know there are some people out there like Joe Rogan, for example, who have a podcast about everything, but that for the most part, that doesn't work for the average person or business owner. So definitely niche down. Like, for example, my podcast, it's a business podcast or an entrepreneurship podcast, but it's niche down even more in that it's like frugal entrepreneurship. And then as far as like a title for your podcast, I definitely okay, so I wouldn't normally suggest something cute, whereas mine is kind of cute, I guess, but it's very obvious what it's about, like Frugalpreneur, that's pretty obvious. But I do have a kind of a tagline under it just in case, called Building a Business on a Bootstrapped Budget. And so it's pretty clear what it's about. But also, I don't recommend someone like having their name in the title. I mean, you could say what the title is with so-and-so, like mine's Frugalpreneur with Sarah St. John. But if you were to, like, if I were to have the Sarah St. John show, while that kind of sounds cool because of the alliteration, it's like, that's not going to really go anywhere because no one knows who that is. Like, if you're Oprah, you can have Oprah, the Oprah show or whatever. But for the average person, I wouldn't recommend like your title being your name. And then, definitely cover art that really pops and is simple, but like colorful. And then as far as what kind of format, I mean, I guess it depends on what your goal is with the podcast, because you could do a solo podcast where it's just you talking, and usually those episodes would be shorter. Or you could do interview style, which is the most common, I think. And the thing that's nice about interview style is you're connecting with people, networking. A lot of people use a podcast, at least if they're using it for business, they're using it as a way to get to know people and get clients and things like that. Or, that person might know somebody and they might, just kind of the networking. So interview podcasts are really good for that. But there are so many out there. So I personally recommend doing a little bit of both, doing the interview and solo episodes. I'm trying to do more of that. I haven't done a whole lot of solo episodes lately, but I'm trying to kind of mix it up more. And then there's also like a panel, or, well, actually, no, the next one would be like co-hosting, where it's like 2 hosts, or a panel where it's like 3 or more, or maybe they invite a guest on and there's like 2 hosts or something like that. So there's all kinds of different ways to to do it. And then to get started, I mean, I recommend, so the mic that I have is called an ATR 2100. It was under $100. It was like 60 or 80 or something. So I recommend, I mean, you could start out with like Apple earbuds or whatever, if you have like no budget whatsoever. But if you have a $100 budget, you could easily get a mic. There's also the Samsung Q2U, which is about the same price. And they're USB mics, so they plug right into the computer. And then really the only other expense at first would be the hosting. You can get free hosting through like Anchor, but I recommend Captivate. That's what I use. It's like $19 a month. Most are $5 to $20 a month, most hosting companies. So those are kind of a few things, like if you're just starting out, what to think about.
Yeah. Well, and for your podcast, did it evolve over time? Because I know when I started this one, I was like, I'm going to ask 5 questions. I'm going to keep it really short. I'm only going to interview like other PR people or other marketing people. And then I was like, this doesn't really feel like what I want to do. So then I started expanding it, and, really, I want to make sure it adds value. So people are still talking about ways to do marketing for your business. But it's expanded to like lead gen, or making sure your LinkedIn profile is good, or maybe you should have a podcast to help promote your business. Right. So it evolved over time, and I started being more regular with it. And I'm still a newbie compared to you. I've done other stuff. Like I had a radio and Facebook show in Houston a few years ago. We were what you would call panel style, which would sometimes get like, if people people would accidentally talk over each other, asking questions to the guests, and it got a little like, angsty sometimes. But when you started, did you know like exactly what your podcast was going to be and kind of the format and how you want it to flow?
Yeah. So, first of all, are you in Houston? Are you still in Houston?
I am not in Houston. I have many people there. I'm now in California.
Oh, okay. I was going to say I'm in Dallas, so not too far, but oh well. So when I started my podcast with the intention of it just being another promotional method with the book, what I did was I interviewed like the CEOs or someone within the company of like the different software programs that I use that were free. And so that was kind of how it started. But then once I kept going with it, I interviewed different people different entrepreneurs that I admired and followed that were within certain niches, like affiliate marketing or podcasting or self-publishing or whatever it is. And then I so it's like every year there's kind of a slight pivot.
Hmm.
Not intentional, it just kind of happens. Well, I mean, at a certain point I make that decision, but it's not like I set out from the get-go.
Yeah, like
Anyway,
year one, I'm going to do this. Year two, I'm going to do this. Yeah.
right. And so then the next year I did interviewing people who started a business with under $1,000 and then bootstrapped it to at least 1 million, not per year, but like total, without any outside capital or loans, credit, uh, any of that kind of stuff, but like bootstrapped it. And I think so far those have been the most successful episodes. Those people really like listening to those.
Oh,
I
yeah.
like some people even starting with no money or under $100 and then bootstrapping up to multiple millions. But so I did some episodes like that. And then let's see, I'm wanting to do, well, I've interviewed one person so far that was on Shark Tank and got a deal.
Oh, wow.
But I'm wanting to interview more of those because I just think that's interesting. And then oh, what else? I'm wanting to do like a kidpreneur series.
Oh, fun.
So it's kind of like I have the general podcast, but then I like to do like these little series,
Yeah.
like, I want to do a Shark Tank series, which I only have one episode of that so far. So it's not really a series, I guess. But, and then I'd like to do a kidpreneur one. And then, of course, I did the bootstrapped one. And then, yeah. So it kind of, like, the type of people I interview is a little different from.
Yeah. It evolves, but that also
Mhm.
helps your audience to learn new things as well.
Mhm.
So, especially, I think as a small business or an entrepreneur, a lot of times you can't get outside funding. You don't have credit built up in your company. You can't get loans. You can't get outside funding. So knowing those things from that series that you did is really important.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, it speaks exactly to who you are, the frugalpreneur, and how you can successfully bootstrap and the things that you need to look out for. I mean, there are so many things when I was doing my business, when I started getting more success, then I would make wild decisions like I'm going to provide benefits or I'm going to make everybody employees, even though they live in 5 different states. Not really like I didn't have that person next to me that was like, that's probably not what you should do right now. Let's do some more projections. Let's think about this, and let's like maybe pivot that a little bit, put more investment in here in the business, and then get there down the road. But I was like so excited and I just wanted to give like everything I could out of the gate. And I think sometimes it's good to hear other people's stories and be able to take a step back, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everyone, I guess, has their own approach and their own, like, maybe if someone has a whole bunch of savings built up, or maybe
Yeah.
they have a spouse that can fully provide, or,
Mm.
something like that, then maybe they can take some more risks and spend some more money here or there or whatever. But yeah, if someone at least is doing an online business, I just feel like it can be done so affordably because there's hardly any overhead as far as like you don't have a building or rent or utilities and um all of that stuff. And so that's just what I found, like the profit margins are much higher with an
Yeah.
online business and very little overhead.
Yeah. And you've also done online courses.
So I'm working on one right now. It's
Okay.
called Podcast Profit Pro. It's
Hmm.
it's on pre-sale right now, but it's a podcasting course, but it's not covering the intro basics. Like, I do have a book called Podcastpreneur, which covers like basics, like podcasting 101, basically. But the course is going to be more about, like, if you already have a podcast, how to monetize it, how to get the right guests, how to get bigger guests, how to get on other shows, bigger shows, different like marketing techniques and like ads, like within the podcast players and all, like, so a lot more detailed.
Yeah.
And I would say like an intermediate probably level there.
Oh, cool. And so that's in pre-sale. When is it going to be like fully launched?
Yeah, so I'm still working on it. So that's why I'm thinking the plan is it should be done by August. So this is May. I don't know when this episode goes live, but we're in May. And so the plan is August. And I'm actually also working on a book that will kind of, I was going to say coincide with the course, but it's not going to be nearly as, because the course obviously is going to have screen shares and all kinds of stuff and like different PDFs and whatnot. So it's going to be more in depth, but there's going to be some overlap of information. So I'm going to try to put both of those out around the same time, and hopefully right before Podcast Movement, which is a podcasting conference in Dallas this year, where I live, in August. And so, yeah.
Very nice. Well, this episode will be coming out in June.
Okay.
So it's a really great little promo spot. So talk it up, talk yourself off as much as you want.
Yeah. So podcastprofitpro.com is the website.
Nice. I love that. You know, I love working with women or hearing women's stories, particularly who have bootstrapped their entrepreneurship. I'm there. I'm a single mom. I've been like at the highest high, the lowest low, and everywhere in between. And so it's really great to get these tips. And I am, for one, going to go back and listen to all those other episodes because I've been listening to some of your more recent ones. But I think there's always something new to learn. And so speaking of, when somebody decides to work with you, what are some of the things they know they can, do you have an intake form? Do you work with everybody? I know some people are like, no, I'm going to work with certain people, or certain niches, because other ones might not fit.
Yeah. So I just work primarily with business owners. I'm not niched down as far as like certain types of businesses, but businesses in general versus like an entertainment podcast, because that's harder to get someone to monetize, first of all. And secondly, I mean, those tend to not probably always stick around, and like, plus they don't usually have the budget, because it's like, if it's an entertainment podcast and they're doing it kind of for fun and they're not monetizing it, it's like, how can they justify paying someone else to produce it and all that stuff? And so, yeah, definitely business owners who have a business there's kind of two tracks. They already have a business and they want a podcast. Either they already have a podcast or they're thinking about starting a podcast to help get more exposure and to promote their business. And like I said earlier, where they could position it in such a way where their ideal client could be the guest on the podcast type thing.
Nice.
And then the other would be someone who doesn't have a business yet, but they want to use the podcast as kind of like the launch pad, I guess, to start the business, or have a business around that. That's a little more difficult than, but yeah. So, and then as far as like, so I have the production side of it, where it's like all the post-production, the editing and the show notes and transcriptions and the graphics and social media and all that stuff. Because I think one problem is so many people start a podcast, but they only get about 7 to 10 episodes in, and for the most, like 90% or something of podcasts.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they pod fade is the term after 7 to 10 episodes, and I think one of the big reasons for that is because they go in not really realizing all the post-production and the time it takes. Because I mean, for me, it takes like, 3 to 4 hours post-production per like hour of recording. And so there's that side of it. And then the marketing side of it, the monetization side. I have it's like 4 M's. I just, I'm still updating my website to reflect this, but so it's like the management side is the production. And then there's marketing, monetization, and matching, which would be like the guest to host, like matching those up to the right shows and the right guests and stuff. So it's kind of all in one.
Yeah, you do it all. I applaud you because I would be lost if I didn't have people helping me with some of those things. Because I don't create graphics. I don't know how to use the editing software. Luckily, like I said, I have an editor boyfriend, so he just slides it in for me. But what are some of the things, and I don't want you to give away all your secrets because I know people work with you and pay you for this, but what are some easy tips and tricks that you would give to somebody? So, okay, they've started their podcast, they got the equipment, they started doing some recording, they're now trying to figure out how to market and monetize it. So what are some things that you have seen like really fail and work, and then on the other side work really well for those? And like, because I imagine, finding the right advertisers or sponsors or what have you is not always easy depending on what your topic is or how many downloads you have. Or does that stuff even matter?
Yeah. So on the monetization side, one big fail is merch, like to have merch for your show.
Oh, okay.
That didn't work at all, at least for me. I think that rarely works, but like t-shirts and whatever else of your
hats, t-shirts,
yeah,
swag.
Unless it's like a really huge show that everyone knows about, as far as sponsorships, like you'd mentioned, so I think the average, so most places they operate on a CPM, which is like cost per mille, which is 1,000. I mean, you'd have to have about 50,000 downloads per month or per episode or per month for that to really make sense to go that route. So like Joe Rogan, he's getting millions of downloads, so that makes sense. Because it's only like, what was the last I checked? I think it was like $15. 15 to 40 is the range per 1,000 downloads. And so what I've actually done is, instead of going that route, like I've approached companies directly and said, and just put out a price and said like what it includes. Like, I'm going to put this ad in the episode and it's going to stay there. It's not going to be replaced. I'll also do like an email blast with the episode with like saying sponsored by so-and-so, and then like the show notes and all this stuff. And I've actually gotten a lot more sponsorships that way.
Oh, cool.
And I was doing that kind of like testing it out, but that's still, and unless you're getting millions of downloads, that's still not, I mean, it'll pay for your expenses and stuff like that, but it's not going to pay your mortgage typically or anything like that. So, and that's another reason I like to work with businesses, because they always have some sort of product or service on the back end. And so what I recommend, if you have a product or service, is to actually create your own ads or talk about your own products and services, because you're going to end up making a lot more money talking about that. As a podcast listener, getting to know, like, and trust you over the course of however many episodes, and then maybe they need your product or service at some point, you're probably going to make a lot more doing that than, I mean, you can do both. I've kind of done a variety, just kind of testing things out. But I definitely recommend that first and foremost. And then also affiliate marketing, where that works pretty well. Like, say you have someone on your show who maybe they have a software program or they have a book or something like that. You could link to it in the show notes or reference it and like create a pretty link. I don't know if you're familiar with that, or like a bit.ly.
Oh,
yeah, like a URL shortener, like get an affiliate link from them assuming they have an affiliate or a referral program, which most people do. And then, yeah, so that if someone buys something from them because of your because of your show, then you'll get a commission basically. And then like with authors, Amazon has an affiliate program. You could link to their book through Amazon with your link. It's only like 2 to 3% or some 2 to 5%. It's not much. But the nice thing about Amazon affiliate program is if, say, someone clicks the link of the book in your show notes, for example, even if they don't buy that book, but say they buy a flat screen TV within 24 hours, as long as they haven't cleared their cookies, you'll get commission on that.
Oh, wow. That's good.
Yeah.
To know.
So that's really the only reason I recommend Amazon affiliate, because the percentage you're getting really isn't that much, but like if they end up buying a whole bunch of stuff,
it can add up.
Yeah, it can add up. So, yeah, I would say on the monetization side, I would say talking about your own products and services, affiliate marketing where it makes sense, like an author comes on. Merch, not so much. And then sponsorships, I would say, well, plus also if you do a sponsorship, make sure it's with a company that makes sense to your audience. Like I don't know, there's a bunch of companies out there that put ads on all kinds of podcasts and it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So it needs to make sense. Otherwise people are just going to get annoyed. Yeah. And then as far as marketing goes, so podcast ads, like ads within a podcast player, which not all players can do them. That works really well as far as getting more listeners and followers and stuff. It can be expensive depending on which app you do it on. I think it could range anywhere from like $99 on the low end to like 2,000. So
yeah, so it really depends on how big your budget is and what your goals are, right? And I like the fact that when you're talking about monetizing your podcast, I think your main point was it's really a marketing tool for you.
Right, exactly.
First and foremost. So don't look at it necessarily as something you're going to make money off of it. Look at it as something that's going to help you market your product, your service, your business.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a lot of people, they want to monetize directly. And you can with sponsorships and things like that, but you're going to make a lot more money with it being more of a marketing tool, kind of like the front end of your sales funnel. Like that's where people find out about you and whatnot. So monetizing more on the back end is what I recommend.
Yeah. Nice. What continues to inspire and motivate you about helping other podcasters start their journey?
Oh, I mean, I just love the space. I feel like it's continuing to grow. And I mean, there's tons of money being thrown at it. We know with like Joe Rogan, for example. I keep bringing him up just because he's like, well, just I don't even listen to a show. I don't think I've ever listened to one, but it's just that's the most popular or well-known podcaster, I guess. But yeah, so I mean, Spotify paid him, I think 1 or 200 million.
Yeah, crazy.
And then Spotify bought up a bunch of apps like Anchor, actually, and some others. And then just different. And Amazon has podcasts now. And Google. So like, even if someone is searching in a Google, like a Google search, they're searching something, a podcast episode could come up as a result. So I just love the direction it's going, that it's becoming more mainstream. Because I mean, even when I first started listening to podcasts, 4 or 5 years ago, I mean, I don't know that I knew a whole lot of people listening to podcasts. I feel like it's really grown really quick, like, because it's been around since 2009. 2004, I believe.
Hmm.
And between 2004 and 2019, so 15 years, there was only 800,000 podcasts. But then between 2019 and 2020, it doubled.
Wow.
And yeah, to like 1.6. And now I think it's over 2 or 3 million. But of course, some of those don't last very long, but still, it's like, and so, but I love the fact that it's almost kind of like a community. I feel like like within the podcasting community, it just feels like everyone's tight knit. Like even when it's two companies that are like the same type of company, it doesn't feel like competition. They like encourage each other. And I don't know. I love the networking aspect of it and the connections and making friends. I'm actually going to a podcast conference this coming weekend. It's going to be the first one I've ever gone to.
Oh, nice.
It's in Austin, so only like a 3-hour drive. And like half of the speakers I already know, only by online though. Like they've been on my show, I've been on their show or whatever. And so it'll be nice to finally meet them in person. But yeah, I think plus just the exposure that podcasting gives, especially a business owner, and the reach, and it's almost like I don't know if I want to say this, but almost like a cult-like thing. It's like, it's almost like
some of my favorite podcasts are about cults.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Or like people who left cults.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of the podcasts I listen to are entrepreneurial, but some of ones like you're talking about, or like the true crime ones, they interest me, but I just don't have I don't have time or room for them on my, like I literally don't have room for them on my phone. Like
Oh
my
gosh.
space is running out.
Yeah, well, to your point, like I usually like love listening to music in the car, but now I commute a few days a week, and the commute is, an hour, sometimes longer, depending on traffic and construction. So I have to have those podcasts queued up.
Yeah.
And that's been really awesome. And listening to different business podcasts or manifestation podcasts, or like this one, only because of, again, like somebody else was like, oh, I'm doing a project on this cult. Here's a podcast episode that just came out on it. And then I got hooked on like, oh, let me dive into that world a little bit. So I think it's interesting to see like what we figure out that we want to listen to, right?
And you know how they always say there's an app for that? Well, I feel like there's a podcast for that.
Yeah. Yeah. You need to trademark that.
Oh, I should.
Yeah, you totally should.
There's a podcast for that. Oh, okay. Now I got ideas. Now I'm having shiny object syndrome because now I have ideas of like what that could be. But
well, I think it goes really well with your brand and what you're doing and how you're helping people, get to the next level, and think about like what they would want to do for their podcast.
Huh. Yeah, you just gave me an idea for a podcast. I can actually call it. There's a podcast for that. I don't know. Yay. Well, we'll see.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll have to stay in touch about that. I want to see where this goes.
I know.
We'll bring you back on, because one of the things I was thinking about doing is starting to bring brands on who want to talk through their brand strategy and do some of that as well. So it's not just talking to experts and getting some of their case studies, right? But then turning it on the head a little bit. So, and that's, when you were talking about how you've kind of done these different series, it's like, oh yeah, that's something I want to do too. So
yeah, I love. Yeah. And the nice thing about podcasts is you can technically do whatever you want. So, I mean, so yeah, if you want to, even if you wanted to pivot, like some people end up changing the name of their podcast. Like they realize they've had so many episodes about a particular topic or they're more interested. They're kind of either their business is pivoting or their interest or whatever. And then they end up like changing, but they don't. Well, I don't know if we want to get off on that, but I was just going to say you should keep the same RSS feed, which is the feed that, so that you keep your followers and listeners and stuff. But I've thought about doing that a couple times, like more into podcasting, but I really like the whole Frugalpreneur, and I love talking to.
Yeah, you got to keep it.
Yeah.
I'm a fan. You got to keep. Yeah. I think there's a lot to be learned there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the fact that I can talk to all kinds of business owners,
Yeah.
not just podcasters, which is
Right.
what it would be if it was just a podcast.
Oh, awesome. So I know you have a couple of websites and ways for people to find you. What is your most highly recommended?
Well, so I give away all 3 of my books, the PDF version for
Oh,
free,
wow.
if anyone's interested. And that's at thesarahstjohn.com/free.
Okay.
That's Sarah with an H and then STJOHN, thesarahstjohn.com, because Sarah St. John was already taken. So I had to, oh.
Well, you are the official,
Yeah.
right? Sarah St. John. So
And then, yeah, if someone's interested in, like, say they already have a podcast or they're thinking about starting a podcast, the podcast agency that I have is PodSeam, PodSeam.com.
nice.
That course I was talking about, podcastprofitpro.com. And then if someone wants to listen to the podcast, they can just go to any podcast app and type in Frugalpreneur and it should pop up.
Awesome. And I'll share these in the show notes so that everybody has access to the resources and can find you easily. Is there anything else that you'd want to share with our audience today?
Oh, well, I mean, I guess a couple of just basic tips that I would give in general when it comes to business is in terms of the shiny object syndrome, since we already kind of talked about that, is to kind of recognize when it's happening. And I think it's okay to have that in the beginning when you're trying to figure out what you're wanting to do. But like once you're zoned in on something that's actually working and then you find yourself like getting distracted, I just recognize it. And, because if you imagine like a pie or a pizza or something, if you're focusing 100% of your time, energy, money, even on one thing, you have 100%. But if you have like 10 slices and doing 10 different things, then you can only dedicate 10% to each thing. So that's just something I've had to learn over the years. And then I would also say the other thing to kind of watch out for is that we spend so much time learning, which is good. We need to learn with podcasts and courses and books and all this stuff. But if you don't implement what you're learning, then it's pointless. So you got to implement what you're learning. And also, because if you're learning all this stuff, when the time comes to actually need to implement it, you're probably not even going to remember. Yeah. So just learn what you need to learn for whatever stage you're in and then implement it.
Nice. 100% agree with that. there are so many projects that I'm like a little bit on the way and I'm like, I just need to sit down and do it. Yeah. Well, awesome. Sarah, thank you so much for sharing a lot of knowledge on podcasts and entrepreneurship today with our audience. And I am going to go download some free resources myself right after this. And I can't wait to see your next book and see what you do next. So thanks to our audience for coming back for another week of Your Brand Amplified. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'll be back again next week.